We are back with, again, History of the Karmapas. Whoa, look at this. Pew. I think we're at the third Karmapa at this point. Yesterday I was reading the history of Bhutan. It is a wild, wild world. Happy Mahashivratri and Ramadan Kareem. Isn't it amazing? This year, it was on basically the same moon cycle. Third Karmapa, Rangjung Dorje, self-manifesting Vajra. And in Bhutan, we have this tradition of drawing these to ward off evil, and this was from Art Forum. They also shine. Wow. And if you look up this cafe, it's still there, I think, like on Google. I haven't visited yet. Rangjung Dorje was undoubtedly one of the most outstanding of the Karmapas, and his numerous works are evidence of this even today. His scholarship and understanding of the teachings were such that he mastered almost all the fields of traditional Tibetan sciences: philosophy, rituals, meditation, medicine, astrology, art, architecture, science, and so forth. At the end of his life, he went to Beijing, where he became the master of the Mongol emperors. On the night of his passing, his image appeared in the moon. Rangjung Dorje was born in a religious family on the 8th day of the first month of the Wood Monkey year 1284 at Tingri Langkor in Tsang, a province in western Tibet. At the end of the 11th century, the Indian master Padampa Sangye came to the same village to establish the Shije lineage. Rangjung Dorje's father, Tempa Chopel, was a sincere practitioner of the Shije lineage and had once met the previous Karmapa, who offered him clothing and food and announced that they would see each other soon again and that Tempa Chopel would eventually lodge him in his home. A wandering yogi without any property, he was surprised. It was only later that he understood the words of the lineage head. On the day of Rangjung Dorje's birth, the mother of the future Karmapa visited her aunt, and the two women settled on the roof to prepare for the event. Traditional Tibetan houses usually have a roof terrace that is used to store wood and grain. It is here that the child was born at nightfall without any pain for the mother. It is said that he immediately sat cross-legged and declared, "The moon has risen," pointing to the moon with his hand. His great-aunt interpreted the baby's behavior as a bad omen and wanted to slip some ash into his mouth to ward off the ill fate. The child's parents dissuaded her and reminded her of the particularly happy pregnancy. At this time, the Siddha, or Gyempa, the main disciple of the previous Karmapa and holder of the Karma Kagyu lineage, was residing in a monastery in the region. At the moment of the child's birth, he had a vision of the second Karmapa haloed by a bright light, which made him realize that his master had returned, though he did not reveal this secret. Due to his great-aunt's inappropriate reaction, Rangjung Dorje remained an ordinary child until his 3rd year, when he suddenly won fame in a surprising way. One day he convinced his playmates to build a small throne of earth covered with grass for him. He then sat upon it, sporting a black crown that he had asked his parents to make according to his precise instructions. He thus gave his first teaching to a group of children who later recounted the episode to the village. The rumor spread quickly all around that a remarkable child lived in the region of Tingri. The young Karmapa was very handsome and extremely assertive despite his young age. He never hesitated to admonish other children by telling them that they were wrong to let themselves be carried away by the emotional afflictions that bind them to the cycle of rebirth. He sometimes mentioned visions that he received during his dreams, and one day he told his father that he was Karmapakshi, that is, the second Karmapa. Thus, his parents decided to take him to the temple in their village where a famous statue of Padampa Sangye was located. On seeing it, the little Karmapa explained that he had the sensation of a rainbow entering him. Although he had not yet learned to read, he knew the alphabet, and his father taught him certain religious precepts. Meeting with the accomplished Orgenpa. At the age of 5, Rangjung Dorje insisted that his father take him to the Siddha Orgenpa. The Siddha had requested that the boy be presented to him after hearing the unusual incidents occurring in the child's village. The night before meeting Rangjung Dorje, Orgenpa had a dream in which the previous Karmapa announced the arrival of the child the next day. Thus, he decided to prepare the throne of the lineage head and told the monks to organize a procession to welcome the little visitor. As soon as the child arrived, he chose to sit on the throne reserved for the Karmapa and bless the Siddha with his little hand. Orgenpa wanted to put him to the test, so he asked him how he dared sit on the throne. The boy responded without the slightest hesitation, "I am the Karmapa." Orgenpa further pushed in his investigation and questioned him about his previous life. The child replied that they had already met and that the Siddha had shared with him his numerous journeys to India. The Karmapa then descended from his throne, prostrated before Orgenpa, and declared that the latter would become his master in this life, as the Karmapa had been his master in the past. Orgenpa was thus convinced that he was indeed in the presence of the incarnation of Karmapakshi. He thus gave him the name Rangjung Dorje, immutable and self-manifesting. At the age of 7, the Karmapa received the novice ordination, and he started his 11-year study program that would make him a refined scholar and accomplished master. Shortly afterward, he had a vision in which the protector Mahakala and the protector Ekajati urged him to go to Tsurphu monastery. Just as one fills a vase, as the Tibetans say, his principal lamas passed on to him the complete teachings and transmissions of the Kagyu lineage and of other Buddhist schools. During his studies, Rangjung Dorje frequently traveled to the surrounding monasteries to receive explanations concerning specific texts from outstanding masters. One day, the protector Ekajati appeared to him again and entrusted him with a twig which he planted, and it soon became a hearty tree. He completed this intensive period of study with a meditation retreat in an isolated location near Mount Everest. When he was 18, Rangjung Dorje wished to continue his studies with the greatest masters of his time, so he went south of Lhasa to the great Nutok Sangpu monastery, where the first Karmapa had also carried out extended study. This monastery trained students from all lineages in 14 colleges and was renowned for its strict monastic discipline. Rangjung Dorje quickly received the full ordination from the abbot of the monastery. During this time, he studied texts on monastic rules, metaphysics, epistemology, and philosophy related to the different schools of thought. Journey to Eastern Tibet and continuation of study. When the Karmapa was about 20 years old, he set out for Kham in Eastern Tibet to restore the monasteries founded by Dusum Khenpa, his first incarnation. Rangjung Dorje declared that the two principal monasteries of Eastern Tibet, Kampo Nenang and Karmagon, represented the body and speech of Karmapa respectively, and that Tsurphu represented his mind. Body, speech, and mind. Om Ahom. Om Ahom. Indeed, the first housed an imposing community of monks, the body. The second, Karmagon, welcomed numerous scholars, the speech, and Tsurphu attracted the meditators, the mind. He pacified the region by putting an end to the conflicts of the local clan chiefs and spread the Dharma, just as his predecessors had done before him. He also traveled to the foot of the sacred Kawa Karpo mountain, the present Burmese border. Upon returning to central Tibet, he stopped at the Jokhang temple in Lhasa to offer a richly decorated canopy to the Jowo statue. During the ceremony, he had a vision in which he presented offerings to the Buddha of the 10 directions. Insatiable in his studies, he began searching for new masters in order to satisfy his thirst for knowledge and his taste for the sciences in general. In Tsurphu, he completed this important period of study with a long meditation retreat at the fortress of the Lotus Garuda Hermitage, a high perch above the monastery where the second Karmapa had often gone on retreat. While there, Rangjung Dorje had a dream in which Orgyenpa, his venerated first master, gave him the teachings of Nagarjuna, the great reputed Indian philosopher. The Karmapa also received the Dzogchen transmission through visions. During a retreat in his early 20s, he, the third Karmapa, had a vision at sunrise of Vimalamitra, and then Padmasambhava, who dissolved into him at a point between his eyebrows. At that moment, he realized and received all the teachings and transmissions of the Dzogchen Tantras of the Nyingma lineage. He wrote many volumes of teachings on Dzogchen and founded the Karma Nyingtik lineage. Through his mastery of the profound Nyingmapa teachings of Vimalamitra, he unified the Kagyu Mahamudra and the Nyingma Dzogchen. However, in order to show his disciples that he was also related to a traditional lineage of Dzogchen teachings, the Karmapa invited the renowned master Kumaraja to Tsurphu and received the complete and specific instructions. This master and his followers were famous for their austere nomadic life. They moved their camp up to 9 times a year to avoid being attached to one location. Kumaraja was also renowned for using all kinds of skillful means in order to help beings. A contemporary master observed that Kumaraja was truly endowed with loving kindness toward wild animals, fish, and to feeble creatures. Thus, he unstintingly exerted himself to form sanctuaries by the mountains, roads, and rivers, and he made the land happy and gentle. He alleviated the misfortunes of frost, hail, and infectious disease, and so on, in all the districts, towns, and countries in which he dwelt, and he was totally devoted to benefiting others. Kumaraja's heart wept with disillusionment and sorrow at the impermanence and suffering of the world, and therefore he always lived in mountain hermitages and totally desolate valleys like Shampo, with only a windbreak for shelter. Acting thus, he delivered many disciples from samsara. By supernormal cognitive powers, he knew the thoughts of those requiring teaching and thus was skilled at teaching, and could bless the minds of others. Because his foremost disciples in the great perfection Dzogchen were the indubitable emanation Karmapa, Rangjung Dorje, and the conqueror Longchenpa, his activity as a propagator of this teaching had no limit or end. Wandering in Tibet. Following the example of great masters of the past, the third Karmapa enjoyed going on retreat in sacred places. Thus he went to meditate on the shores of the Namto, a lake perched nearly 5,000 meters high at the foot of a mountain range to the north of Lhasa. It is the second most important salt lake of the Tibetan plateau after the famous Kokonor. To this day, the area is populated with wolves, bears, and lynx. Herds of yak, goats, antelopes, and wild asses graze in the immense prairies, and it is still possible to encounter migratory birds such as rare black-necked cranes. There are many caves near the lake's shore, and Rangjung Dorje chose one where Padmasambhava had meditated in the 8th century. Around his 39th year, the Karmapa set out on a journey to Khonpo in southern Tibet that would last 3 years. This region is known for its wild splendor, landscapes, and majestic forests, so different from the vast arid swaths of central Tibet. He then went on a pilgrimage to the pure crystal mountain, Dakpa Shelri, and its environs in Sari that form one of Tibet's most revered pilgrimage circuits. Circumambulating the 5,735-meter mountain can take as long as 15 days. Tibetans consider the mountain to be the residence of the Yidam Chakra Samvara, and circumambulating it, as with other sacred pilgrimage sites, is believed to purify negative karma from previous and current lives and accumulate merit for future lives. During his pilgrimage, the third Karmapa went to the shore of the White Lake, Tsokar, whose waters of extraordinary purity are set among glaciers and forests. This person, Mr. Sonam Wangchuk in Ladakh, is fasting for the climate. As he has repeatedly said, Ladakh is facing some severe climate change issues, and you guys should listen to what he has to say if you're interested in Asia and global warming, etc. The third Karmapa meditated in this area in order to leave an imprint of his blessing for future generations of practitioners. Since then, a number of hermits have chosen to retreat there. In 1326, he returned to central Tibet and continued to dispense his teachings and blessings to the Tibetans of Lhasa. Soon after, he decided to set out again. Over the next 5 years, he would cross all of Tibet. On reaching the east, he stopped at Karmagon Monastery in Kham to bestow teachings and transmissions. In 1328, he decided to construct on the Sogchu, a tributary of the Salween in the west of Kham, a bridge that was not held by traditional braided ropes but by large iron chains, which was extremely rare at this period. This major technical innovation for the Tibetan world, which began to spread in the 14th century, allowed caravans to cross long arms of rivers, and it also facilitated access to religious teachings. In Khanbalik, Beijing, with the Mongol emperors. Since the beginning of the 14th century, the Mongols of the Yuan dynasty struggled to execute orders passed down from Khanbalik, Beijing, their capital. Permanent intrigue troubled life at the court, and the emperors succeeded each other in the climate of tension that weakened internal politics. In 9 years, from 1320 to 1329, no less than 4 emperors served as head of the country, victims of conspiracy at all levels of power. The Chinese elite, who were absent from the government, took advantage of the fragile situation created by the quarrels at court and incited the people to openly manifest hostility toward the Mongols. Moreover, according to tradition, the emperor, as son of heaven, was expected to control the elements, yet floods devastated the center of China and caused famines and epidemics from 1327, decimating the population. In 1332, in this climate of instability, the third Karmapa was invited to the court of Khanbalik by the Mongol descendant of the great Genghis Khan, Tog Timur. Tibet was still under Mongol suzerainty and upheld excellent relations with its neighbors. The Mongols were open to different scientific, philosophical, artistic, and spiritual trends of the period. And the imperial family was particularly interested in all aspects of Tibetan Buddhism. After long preparations in Tsurphu, the Karmapa set out for the long and dangerous journey that would take him to the Mongol emperor. The caravan traveled as far as eastern Tibet, where it experienced storm and snowfall, an unusual occurrence at that time of year. Blocked by inclement weather, the lineage head had to journey back to Tsurphu. He set out again in the spring of 1333. Rangjung Dorje observed unusual sights en route that led him to understand that Tog Timur had died, and he immediately conducted a funeral ceremony in his honor. So he did not receive any news from court, he just knew. Upon his arrival at the imperial palace of Khanbalik, the Karmapa was informed that the emperor had in fact died the day the Karmapa had perceived the inauspicious omens. He was welcomed with splendor by Irinchibal, the new emperor, then 6 years old, and his following. Soon after, Rangjung Dorje had a vision of the imminent demise of Irinchibal, who would die 2 months later. Preparations began for the enthronement of the next ruler, Togon Temur, who would become the 9th and last emperor of the Yuan dynasty. The Karmapa chose a date coinciding with an auspicious day of the calendar, and was requested to preside over the ceremony in 1333. Khanbalik, the city of the Khan for the Mongols, or Dadu, the capital for the Chinese, which would later become Beijing, was constructed in 1267 by the first emperor of the Yuan dynasty, Kublai Khan. The city had a perimeter of 30 kilometers and was conceived in 3 parts. In the center was the imperial palace, which was surrounded by a wall. Beyond the first wall was the imperial city, the residence of ministers and the nobility. Behind the second wall lived the rest of the population in the so-called outer city, which was protected by a final immense wall that was punctuated with 11 gates. Each evening these gates were closed after peasants and itinerant sellers left. Khanbalik was a masterpiece of ancient urban Chinese construction and an international metropolis that contained well laid out buildings and wide streets with a complete drainage system. Markets for rice, wheat, vegetables, dried fruits, furs, horses, camels, pearls, corals, and so forth could be found everywhere in the city, which was China's northern commercial center. The handicraft industry was in the hands of numerous craftsmen families and included the manufacture of felt rugs, silver, gold, and agate processing, silk weaving, weaponry making, and mining. The Yuan regime adopted a tolerant policy toward all spiritual traditions. Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, Islam, Christianity, shamanism, and so on spread in Khanbalik. Khanbalik accommodated a number of outsiders, traders, poets, preachers of all allegiances, imams, shamans, lamas, and so forth. They arrived from all directions, including Central Asia, Persia, Arabia, Nepal, but also Europe, whence came Marco Polo at the end of the